Sayın Dekanım, değerli hocalarım, kıymetli konuklarımız ve sevgili öğrenci arkadaşlar. İstanbul Üniversitesi İktisat Fakültesi olarak her yıl Kasım ayında düzenlediğimiz Uluslararası İstanbul İktisat Araştırma Konferansımızın ikincisine hoş geldiniz. ...21. yüzyılın en önemli sorunlarından biri, özellikle endüstriyel üretimin artmasıyla ortaya çıkan çevre sorunları ve iklim krizidir. Sorunun kökeninin iktisadi olması, 1970'lerden itibaren iktisatçıların çalışma alanına dönüşmesine neden olmuştur. Yeşil ekonomi kavramı, çevresel riskler ve kıtlıkları optimize etmekte kullanılırken, sürdürülebilir kalkınma ise insan refahını iyileştirmeye ve sosyal eşitliği inşa etmeye çalışmaktadır. Bu bağlamda 2022 yılında konferansımızın teması yeşil ekonomi ve sürdürülebilir kalkınma olarak belirlenmiştir. Programımıza başlamadan önce sizleri Cumhuriyetimizin kurucusu Ulu Önder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, aziz silah arkadaşları ve ebediyete intikal etmiş şehitlerimiz adına bir dakikalık saygı duruşuna ve ardından İstiklal Marşımızı okumaya davet ediyorum. Konuşmalarını yapmak üzere İstanbul Üniversitesi İktisat Fakültesi Dekanı Sayın Profesör Doktor Sayım Yorğun'u kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Kıymetli hocalarım, çok kıymetli misafirlerimiz, sevgili öğrenciler, hoş geldiniz. Umarım bu yağmurlu günde, bu bereketli günde konferansımız da aynı şekilde bereketli olur ve sizler için, ülkemiz için faydalanılacak, verimli bilgi üretilecek bir konferans olmasını diliyorum. Dear guests, welcome. It was a great pleasure to host you to our conference. I will continue my opening speech in Turkish. You will have opportunity to read the text in English on the slides. Neden yeşil ekonomiyi seçtiğimizi, neden sürdürülebilir kalkınmayı esas aldığımızı ifade etmek istediğimizde sanırım ilk aklımıza gelen kavramın sürdürülebilirlik olduğunun altını çizmek lazım. Özellikle son 10 yılda iklim değişikliğini dikkate aldığımızda biyoçeşitliliğin kaybolduğu, su kıtlığının ortaya çıktığı, kuraklığın esas olduğu bir dönemi yaşıyoruz. Ekonomik ve sosyal meselelerimizde özellikle geleneksel ekonominin bu sorunlara cevap vermemesi nedeniyle yeni bir ekonomik anlayışı, yeni bir ekonomik bakışı gündemimize almamız gerekiyor. İşte o bakış yeşil ekonomi, sürdürülebilir kalkınma olarak gündemimize gelmiştir. 2008-2009 küresel mali krizi özellikle yeşil ekonomi kavramımızı gündeme getirdi ve biz de fakülte olarak bu kavramın çerçevesinde, bu kavramın etrafında bilimsel veri üretmenin, bilimsel alternatif üretmenin arayışı içerisindeyiz ve bu arayışımızı sürdüreceğiz. Yine sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedefi 2015 yılında gündeme gelen, özellikle de sürdürülebilir kalkınmanın 17 hedefinin belirlendiğini dikkate aldığımızda bu hedeflerin yoksulluğu esas aldığını, yokluğu esas aldığını, büyümeyi inşa etmeyi esas aldığını, eğitim, sağlık, sosyal yapıda eşitliği esas aldığını görüyoruz ve bütün bunları yaparken hem çevreyi korumayı hem de iklim değişikliğindeki ihtiyaçları göz önünde bulundurmayı esas aldığını söyleyebilirim. Yeşil ekonomiye geçiş, sürdürülebilir üretim ve tüketim için özellikle temel bir ihtiyaçtır. Çünkü doğal sermayeyi fiziksel sermaye ile değiştirmek pahalıdır. Kirli suyu temizlemek maliyetlidir ama bütün bunları yapmamak bize, toplumumuza ve dünyaya, insanlığa daha büyük bir maliyet doğuracaktır. Yeşil ekonomi dediğimizde düşük karbonlu üretimi, kaynakların verimli kullanılmasını, sosyal olarak da kapsayıcı bir ekonomiyi kastediyoruz. Yeşil ekonomi, istihdam ve gelirdeki büyümeyi sağlayan, karbon emisyonlarının ve kirliliğinin azaltılmasına katkı sunan, enerji ve kaynak verimliliğini artırılmasını, biyoçeşitliliği esas alan ve ekosistemin korunmasını sağlayan bir ekonomidir. Yeşil büyüme, refahımızı artırdığı bir ekonomik yapı olarak karşımıza çıkmaktadır. Özellikle yeşil ekonomi stratejisini sürdürülebilir teknolojik stratejilerle buluşturmamız gerekmektedir. Yeşil ekonomiyi yoksullukla ve yoklukla mücadeleyi esas aldığını ve nüfusun standardını yükseltmeyi, refahı yaygınlaştırmayı hedef seçtiğini görmeniz gerekiyor. Yeşil ekonomi sürdürülebilir kalkınmanın yerini alamaz. Ancak yeşil ekonomiyi var edebilmek için sürdürülebilir ekonomiyi esas alabilmek için yeşil ekonomiyle arasında güçlü bir bağ kurmamız gerektiğinin altını çizmek istiyorum. Çünkü yeşil ekonomi ekonomik büyümeye makroekonomik bir yaklaşım sunmaktadır. Sürdürülebilir kalkınmanın rolünün ancak yeşil ekonomiyle sağlanacağı gerçeğini görmemiz gerekiyor. Çevre kirliliğine yol açan, insanların yaşamına zarar veren kaynaklar yerine sağlıklı kaynakları kullanmak asıl temel ihtiyaçlarımızdan biridir. Sürdürülebilir kalkınma, maddi ve insani enerjinin destek ve istihdamın optimal bir şekilde kullanılmasını sağlar. Bugün ve gelecekte herkesin hakkını güvence altına alan bir anlayışı gündeme getirir. Bugünü bir emanet olduğunun bilincinde hareket etmek zorundayız. Şu anda bizlere teslim edilen kaynakların gelecek nesiller için de gerekli olduğu düşüncesini hiçbir zaman unutmamamız gerekiyor. Bu nedenle sürdürülebilir kalkınma insanı ve doğal kaynakları kapsar. Doğal kaynakları tüketmeden daha iyi bir üretimin arayışını gündeme getirir. Tüketim ve üretim modellerinin sürdürülebilirliğini sağlamak için özellikle teşvik programlarını ve planları ön planda tutmamız gerekiyor. Hükümetlerin bu noktada karar alması ve politikalarını bu hedeflere odaklandırması gerekmektedir. Yeşil ekonominin ve büyümenin birlikte olabileceğini, doğru politikalarla hem istihdamın sağlanabileceğini, refahın artırılabileceğini, çevremizi koruyabileceğimiz gerçeğini görmemiz gerekiyor. Kısaca ifade etmek gerekirse, sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedefleri ekolojik sistem ile ekonomik sistem arasında iyi bir, gerçek bir bağ kurmayı zorunlu kılmaktadır. Küresel sosyal koruma fonuna ihtiyaç olduğuna dikkatlerinizi çekmek istiyorum. Hak temelli kalkınma modelinin esas alınması gerektiğine dikkatlerinizi çekmek isterim. Bu düşüncelerle özellikle refahın yaygınlaştırılması, yoksulluğun azaltılması ve dünyanın daha iyi yaşanır bir yer olabilmesi için hep birlikte mücadele etmemiz gerektiğini, bilimsel çalışmalarımızı bu alanlara odaklandırmak gerektiğini ifade ederek en içten teşekkürlerimi ifade ediyorum. Emeği geçen bütün arkadaşlarımı tebrik ediyorum. Bu konferansın hayırlara vesile olmasını diliyor, saygılar sunuyorum.
Sayın hocamıza konuşmalarından ötürü teşekkür ediyoruz. Konferansımızın açılış konuşması Profesör Anil Markandya tarafından yapılacaktır. Profesör Markandya, 30 yılı aşkın süredir doğal kaynaklar ekonomisi alanında önde gelen otoritelerden biri olarak kabul edilmektedir. Profesör Markandya, ekonometri alanındaki master öğrenimini 1968 yılında, çevre ekonomisi alanındaki doktorasını ise 1975 yılında London School of Economics'te tamamlamıştır. Profesör Markandya, iklim değişikliği, çevresel değerleme, çevre politikası, enerji ve çevre, yeşil muhasebe, makro iktisat ve dış ticaret konularında çok sayıda yayın yapmıştır. Halen Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde Princeton, Berkeley ve Harvard Üniversitelerinde, Birleşik Krallık'ta ise University College London ve Bath Üniversitelerinde akademik çalışmalarda bulunmaktadır. Profesör Markandya, 2012 yılında Avrupa Çevre ve Doğal Kaynaklar Ekonomistleri Derneği Başkanı olmuş ve bu görevini 2 yıl boyunca sürdürmüştür. Profesör Markandya, Birleşmiş Milletler Kalkınma Programı, Avrupa Birliği, Dünya Bankası gibi pek çok uluslararası organizasyonda danışmanlık yapmaktadır. Konuşmalarını yapmak üzere Sayın Profesör Anil Markandya'yı kürsüye davet ediyorum. I kindly invite Professor Anil Markandya here to make his keynote speech.
Very much. A great pleasure for me to return to Turkey, a country I have visited many times over the last 30 years in many different capacities. My talk today is going to be about the role of natural capital, and it's linked firstly with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I would like to share some of the results from our work on the basis of estimates we've made, particularly for your country, Turkey. And this work was done jointly with a colleague at Washington State University, Suzette Pedrosa-Gallinato, and is being supported by the Green Growth Knowledge Platform and also the United Nations Environment Programme. So, as the Dean has mentioned, natural capital is an important part both of green economy and of sustainable development. And here we want to try and look at the links between the two. So the aim of the presentation, the aim is to estimate natural capital in relation to these SDGs, and to develop a methodology for estimating natural capital in different areas, and use the methodology also for estimating the costs of closing this natural gap. Again, as the Dean pointed out, that if we are losing some natural capital, if we need to replace it, we may need to spend money on physical capital, which would be quite expensive. I'd also like to report progress on the SDGs in physical and value terms. Look at the natural capital, the gap there is between what we would need in terms of natural capital to meet the SDGs for land degradation, water and sanitation, climate change, air quality, materials efficiency, for forests, wetlands, and protected areas, and then offer some concluding remarks and maybe some next steps. So the aim of the exercise, just very briefly, is that natural capital has a major role in meeting key social goals, such as those which are defined by the SDGs. The World Forum on Natural Capital defines the term as a stock of natural assets which include geology, soil, air, water, and all living things. It is from this natural capital that humans derive a wide range of services, often called ecosystem services, which make human life possible. The OECD defines natural capital as assets in their role of providing natural resource inputs and environmental services for economic production. The World Bank focuses on the way natural capital is measured, noting that a particular natural capital asset is measured as the discounted sum of the value of the rents generated over its lifetime. So how much would natural capital stock have to increase to meet the different SDGs? That is the question I want to ask, and I call the answer the natural capital gap. This gap can be measured in physical and monetary terms. So focusing on this gap takes us away from the measurement of natural capital at the national level, where previous studies have shown that natural capital, the value is quite small compared to physical and human capital. But here we see its role is quite important. So which of the SDGs are most linked to natural capital? Well, here are the ones which we find, 9 of them, particularly SDG 2 on zero hunger, SDG 3 on good health and well-being, SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, 9 on industry, innovation and infrastructure, 11 on sustainable cities and communities, 12 on responsible consumption production, 13 on climate change, 14 on life below water, and 15 on life on land. Now, each of these sub-goals, these goals have some sub-goals, and if you have looked at the literature, you'll find there are many indicators of these. And in some cases, we have targets for how much the indicator, what value the indicator should take. And the target date is 2030, which is only 8 years away. So our aim is to measure the additional natural capital it would take to meet these targets. What will we gain from this exercise? Well, we establish a link between key SDGs and natural capital, the needs they embody. Meeting the target will also require other forms of capital, and we compare the increase in natural capital with the financial capital needed to bring about this increase. And that comparison provides a kind of capital-based cost-benefit assessment that can inform priorities for where and in which sectors the resources should be allocated. So what have we done so far? We've tracked progress on physical indicators. We've valued the gain in natural capital for meeting the SDGs. We've estimated the cost of achieving the gain in natural capital to meet the SDGs. And we've done this for 40 countries. These 40 countries are selected so they account for 80% of the world's GDP and 73% of the global land area. And Turkey is one of the countries, and I will make a few specific remarks about the results for your country as we go through. The methods used to make the estimate, well, they're quite complicated. For agricultural land degradation, we use the Global Information System-based estimates of actual net primary productivity of agricultural land, which is then compared against this potential productivity. And the gain in ecosystem services is then proportional to the gap in productivity filled by the SDG. For water and sanitation, we look at the reduction in disability-adjusted life years achieved by meeting the target. For air quality, is the reduction in premature mortality achieved by meeting the target. For climate change, is the reduction in greenhouse gases to meet climate targets multiplied by the social cost of carbon. For materials, we estimate that each dollar reduction in materials results in a 2 to 8% increase in the value of ecosystem services, because when we use natural materials, physical materials, and dispose of them, that disposal causes damage to our ecosystems. For forests, it's the increase in the value of ecosystem services from prevented loss of forest areas. From wetlands, it is the increase in value of ecosystem services from prevented loss of wetland areas. And then for protected areas, it's the protection which prevents the loss of ecosystem services. And without this protection status, the services would decline to a minimum in 10 years. Then we have to estimate the costs, and here we had, for agricultural land, we had looked at studies of remediation across countries, and this is quite difficult, and the numbers are quite wide, but I'll present them anyway. For water and sanitation, it's a bit easier. The World Bank has done quite a lot of work to estimate what the costs are for meeting the basic improvements. And for climate, we used a lot of modeling results, from particularly from a study by McCullum and others, which looked at 6 global modeling frameworks to estimate investments needed to chart a course towards either below 2 degrees or to achieve even better 1.5 degrees. And the costs cover the period 2020 to 2030. And for air pollution, McCullum and that study also estimated the cost to reduce pollution levels globally. And then we broke down that cost for different countries. And for materials, most of the cost data which we obtained was cost per ton of CO2 abated, and then we converted that to cost per unit material, the links between materials and CO2 emissions. For deforestation, the source is the Convention for Biological Diversity, which gave a lot of detailed information. For wetlands, the costs for achieving the goals were also estimated by the CBD, we use that. And for protected areas, it was more complicated, because when we make an area a protected area, we lose the use of that area for agriculture or pasture. And so we had to take account of those losses. For marine sites, we also looked at the cost of meeting the targets from different studies. These are the countries we included to give a representation across several different parts of the world, from Africa, from Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and some high-income countries, and I include Turkey in that last group here. You can see we cover quite a wide range. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's start then with progress on the SDGs in physical value terms. And here, what are the physical targets that we set? Well, there is a target for agricultural land to be remediated by 2030 in the SDGs. For water and sanitation, we want the whole world to have improved water supply and sanitation by 2030. For climate, we want to reduce the greenhouse gases under a fair share of distribution across countries by 2030. And we have two targets, one for 1.5 degrees and one for 2 degrees. For air pollution, we want to reduce the concentrations of PM2.5 to below 10 micrograms per cubic meter as an average annual weighted concentration. For materials, we have target annual increases in efficiency, which have been specified by the International Resource Panel, and we use that. For deforestation, we want to halve the baseline rates of loss by 2030. And for wetlands, we want to halve them also the same. And for protected areas, we want 17% of terrestrial areas and 10% of marine areas to be protected. So these are the targets, and we measure progress accordingly. So let's start with the case of natural capital gap and the natural land degradation in Turkey. The degradation of land in Turkey is not estimated very large, it's 4% of total land, but the loss of ecosystem services associated with that loss is very high, it's about 22% of potential value. So, in other words, 22% of the value of that land is lost because of the degradation. And on a proportional rule of allocating the SDG target globally, we'd expect about 401,000 hectares of degraded agricultural land needs to be remediated in your country. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information on the amount that you have remediated in recent years. Maybe some of you who are working in this area might like to follow up and see if we can get that kind of information so we can track progress to this target. But here are some of the figures that emerge from the gains in natural capital and the costs. Well, for Turkey, as I said, there's 4,000 square kilometers. The present value of the natural capital gap is about 169 billion, and the cost range is between 0.01 billion and about 4 billion. So you can see that by filling the gap, we get a huge increase in the value of natural capital, but at a very low relative cost in terms of financial capital. The benefits in Turkey are very high because the loss of land degradation is extremely high. There's a very wide range of costs which reflect the high level of uncertainty on what programs will be necessary to achieve the remediation. And we don't have the kind of detailed information for your country, so we had to look at a cross-sectional studies to see what the costs would be. And the ratio of gain relative to cost points to very significant benefits from undertaking such a remediation. Let's now turn to water supply and sanitation. And here the targets in the SDGs, as I said earlier, are to achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for everybody, and also to achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation hygiene for all. Now in Turkey, your problem is relatively small. Only 5% of the population had unimproved sanitation, and nobody had unsafe water, at least as reported in 2015. That may have changed with the huge amount of refugee immigration that you've had, but these are the latest figures that we could obtain. But the benefits in terms of disability, just in life years that we reduce, avoided, is about 157 billion for meeting the target. The cost of meeting it, about 2 to 4 billion. So again, as the Americans say, it's a slam dunk case. The benefit to cost ratio is between 37 and 92. Let me now turn to the natural capital gap, which is a bit more complicated here for air quality. And here the SDG 3 aims to substantially reduce the mortality rate due to air pollution, and SDG 11.6 aims to reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities, especially in terms of air quality. Now, the indicators are the mortality rate attributable to household and ambient air pollution, and the SDG 11 is the annual mean concentrations of fine particles. Now, SDG annual mean concentration guideline has actually reduced from 10 micrograms to 5. And based on this guideline, the SDG targets are to reduce concentration to a level which would essentially remove all deaths of PM 2.5 by 2030. So in Turkey, what is the situation? Well, the concentration PM 2.5 in 2016 was about 17 micrograms of waste concentration, and about 29,000 deaths were attributable to this pollution in that year, 2013. The benefits of getting to 0 deaths by 2030 are very large. And the additional costs, again, taken from the study of McCullum and others, they're mainly Europe-wide studies. And again, you could probably improve on this because you can see when we're traveling in Istanbul, there are so many cars, there's so much traffic. How can we reduce this air pollution to below 10 micrograms? It may cost more than we've estimated. But even if we increase that cost figure, you can see that the population of about 82 million, the concentration currently has actually gone up. It declined from 19.9 micrograms in 1990 to 17.2 micrograms in 2013, but it has risen again. It's now back to 19.3 in 2019. So we can see that there is a big amount of work to do to get to the SDG by 2030. But if we do get to it, the number of deaths we would reduce at least about 29,000. The loss that we have per year is about 46 million per year, 46 billion. But over a long period of time, benefits are about 778 billion. And the costs, depending on whether we are pursuing a strict climate policy or with no climate policy, range from 14 to 17 billion. So the benefit to cost ratio is very high, 56 billion. Let me now turn to the issue of climate change. This, again, is a very difficult one. We just had a big meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, and we need to make emissions about between 25 and 55% lower in 2030 than they were in 2017. 25% to get to a 2-degree centigrade pathway, and 55% to get to 1.5-degree pathway. Now, under current policies, the emissions in 2030 will be about 18.9 billion for a 2-degree target, and 34.9 billion under 1.5-degree target. So current policies will not get us to these values. So at the same time, as I said, to value the reductions, we use the social cost of carbon, which is an estimate of the damages that climate change does. So the required reduction in Turkey, which is based on a fair share, would be about 104,000 kilotons relative to 2017 levels for a 2-degree pathway, and about 245,000 kilotons for a 1.5-degree pathway. But emissions from 2017 to 2019 in your country actually went up about 19,000. So the expected increase under business as usual, if you carry on like you're doing, will be between 162,000 and 265,000 kilotons. So there's a big gap for Turkey to meet its fair share of greenhouse gases. But the benefits globally are also very large. And the benefits are the reduction in the social cost of carbon. If the targets are met, and they're between 15 and 71 billion for a 2-degree target, and 32 to 151 billion for 1.5 degree target. And the costs really are also quite low. And some people say that the cost for 2 degree target could even be negative because there are so many other benefits that you get. They're called co-benefits. So the benefit to cost ratio is about 2 for a 2 degree target and about 2.5 for a 1.5 degree target. The problem here, of course, is the benefits are global, but the costs of meeting them, if we allocate these reductions to Turkey, the costs have to be borne here. So we need some form of some form of support or compensation for countries that have not been responsible for the increase, and this has been part of what was discussed at Sharm el-Sheikh under the so-called loss and damage function. Let me turn now to materials efficiency, and this is also an important area. And here we have we expect that the amount of materials we use, which are about 89 gigatons in 2017, under business as usual, will go up to about 167 gigatons. These are all kinds of metals, biomass, fossil fuels, and so on. And non-metallic minerals, which are the largest share of total material used, these are expected to go up from 44 gigatons to 86. Metal use is smaller in weight, but the projected growth is more rapid. Now, the idea is to try and reduce this growth in materials to become more efficient. So what we need then is an increase in efficiency. We need to increase the amount of GDP we produce per unit of materials. And the efficiency requirements are about 2% a year for fossil fuels and biomass, 1.5% per year for non-metallic materials, and 0.75% a year for metal. And the target for reducing materials use have been set by UNEP and the International Resource Panel. Well, this is what progress you've been making in Turkey in terms of the reduction so far. Now, these are the gains in efficiency for the 4 categories, which are biomass, fossil fuels, metals, and non-metallic minerals. For biomass, you've been improving the annual gain in efficiency, that's the amount of production per unit in GDP per unit of biomass, has been improving at 2.2% a year. The target is 2.2%. Essentially, you're close to meeting the target. But for fossil fuels, you've actually reduced efficiency. Metals, the efficiency increase is very small. For non-metallic minerals, it's also negative. So these are areas in which Turkey would have to improve efficiency quite a great deal to be on target to meet the SDGs by 2030. But the benefits are difficult because the estimates are very wide. They range from 2 billion to 9 billion for Turkey. The costs range from 3 billion to 6 billion for meeting. So the benefit to countries is not so high here, but the gains are important. Make the economy more efficient in the way we use these materials. We now turn to forests, wetlands, and protected areas. I've already stated the goals, and if the targets are met, then the different parts of the world, we want to halve the loss of natural habitat, forests, and wetlands, and ensure that 17% of terrestrial and 10% of coastal areas are protected. So for forests, there is no loss because, in fact, Turkey has actually increased its forest cover over the last decade or so. So we do not have a natural capital gap to fill in with respect to forests. For wetlands, wetland areas, there is a loss, but I don't have a detailed figure for Turkey, so we had to use a global figure. And the target by 2030 is to reduce wetland loss by about a half. And based on this estimate, about 11,000 hectares of inland wetlands and 6,000 hectares of coastal wetlands need to be protected by 2030. And for protected areas, the targets are about 7 million hectares for terrestrial areas and 2 million hectares for marine. So for these areas, you can see, this shouldn't say Philippines, should say Turkey. We have the benefits here of wetlands is about 5 billion. The costs of protecting them are between 25 and 34 million. For terrestrial areas, the benefits are 62 billion. The costs are between 18 and 76 billion. The cost-benefit ratio is a bit more close here. But for marine areas, it's very low protection, but the benefits are very, very high. So this is a summary of the results. And here we can see for different countries, you can see for Turkey what the different sources of the net benefits are. These are the benefits minus the cost. So you can see that the compared to other parts of the world, you get a huge benefit from air pollution, particularly, but also for agricultural land remediation and some from water and sanitation, and then a small amount from terrestrial ecosystems and materials efficiency. So these are the figures for the wetlands. I just repeat them. But here I'm going to compare the increase in the value of natural capital that you'll get from the SDGs compared with our best estimate of your current stock of natural capital. And the current stock of natural capital estimated by the World Bank in its most recent study is about 169 billion. Now, if you do all the things we've talked about, your total will go up to 559 billion. So the increase, the stock of natural capital, sorry, the current stock of natural capital is 407 billion. I get the wrong figure. The increase that you will get if you achieve all these targets will take it up to 559 billion. So you get 137% increase in your natural capital from meeting these SDGs, if you can do it. So some concluding remarks. A global study, this is a global study based on global sources, cannot obtain as close an estimate of the costs and benefits of investments to increase the stock of natural capital as a local study. So if there are any of you interested in working on this, we'd be happy to support you to try and improve on the detailed cost figures for Turkey. There are several areas where the estimates can be made better, in particular the benefits of degraded agricultural land and the cost of remediating that, ambient air quality costs of improving that, and terrestrial ecosystems. In addition, the targets taken for the SDGs were taken from the GPKP study, and so for forests, for example, you don't need to do anything to achieve the SDG, but you may still want to have a target for your country. So this is where I think we stand on this now. I would just say there is a detailed paper available if you like. Now, Mr. Chairman, I did have another presentation on green growth briefly. I don't know if I've got time, 10 minutes or so. Yes, please. Thank you.
Sir, please.
Yes, okay. Somebody change this? This is really more because, as the Dean said, we have been working on the green economy. I just wanted to share some ongoing work in progress on natural capital and green growth. This is, as I say, very much work in progress, but I think that some of the results are interesting, and you may have some comments on them because it's very much in your area. So green growth is seen as growth that does not harm the environment. Now, there are many ways of measuring it, and the Dean pointed to many dimensions, which I cannot capture, but one way of measuring it would be to see if a period of growth has been achieved, that whether there's been any decline in the environment. And of course, in the value of the environment, if there's been no decline in natural capital, then perhaps we can say that that has been a period of green growth, because we increased GDP, but we have not reduced natural capital. Now, measures of natural capital have been produced by the UNDP, and also by the World Bank. And here I'm going to take the World Bank figures with estimated natural capital. But I have only taken the part of natural capital which is renewable natural capital. So I have not included changes in the stock of oil or gas, because that, if you, for some countries like Saudi Arabia, you get big increases in the value of that stock, and then you say that they've got a huge increase in natural capital, and therefore their growth is very green, but it's not capturing the essence of what we want to measure. So the data that we have is from 1995 to 2018. It's quite a long period, about a quarter of a century. And we provide estimates for all countries in the world. They provide it. And we want to see if the countries experience green growth. We compare this increase in natural capital with the increase in national output for that period. So a minimum requirement is for green growth is that natural capital should not decline. But one can hope for more than that. So one can hope that you achieve growth in GDP, but you also achieve a growth in natural capital because it's possible to increase it. So if both are positive, we can say that we're in the realm of green growth. So if we have GDP has grown, but natural capital has fallen, we have unsustainable growth. And when GDP is declining with natural capital, the country is experiencing both economic and environmental decline. And finally, it's possible that natural capital is increasing, but GDP is declining. That is very rare. So we have these kind of four categories. And the one, green growth is the top right, unsustainable growth is the bottom, is the top left. And then we have economic and environmental decline in the bottom left, and then this unusual category of economic decline with environmental enhancement, which I have not seen cases like that. So we looked at the data for 35 countries, most European countries only, to see what has actually happened since in this period, 1995 to 2018. And Turkey is there, it's on the list. So we can see, we compared the two, and of 23 of the 35 countries, we have had what we would consider in this period green growth. That is, we've had an increase in GDP and an increase in natural capital. The 11 countries that have seen a decline, with the greatest decline first are Romania, Ukraine, Ireland, Luxembourg, Czech Republic, Russian Federation, United Kingdom, which is where I come from, Denmark, Netherlands, Slovak Republic, and Turkey. The countries with the greatest percentage growth in natural capital were Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Sweden, Lithuania, and Poland. And I also tried to plot a greenness of growth, how much increase in natural capital we got per 1% increase in GDP. This is the relationship between the two, between the increase in GDP and growth. I'm happy to say Turkey is positive. So we do have an increase in GDP and also an increase in natural capital. Not much, but there is some. So it's in this category, in the top category here. And if you look in terms of the greenness of growth, It doesn't show up here. These are the ones, the greenest ones at the top, and the negative ones, of course, not green at all. And Turkey is somewhere up here close to, no, it is there, Turkey. You can see it. It is positive and it is green. But this sounds like a good story, but it's not a complete story because there's limitations to this data. This analysis has a number of flaws. Firstly, the main problem is that the measure of natural capital is incomplete. And second, the measure of GDP is not so accurate as a measure of the value of goods and services. So on the first, it does not cover marine ecosystems and doesn't take account of the decline in the capacity of the atmosphere to control climate change. That is such a big issue, and that's not captured. Because what we have in the measure of natural capital is land for agriculture, ecosystem services, other ecosystem services, forests, water, and some element of fisheries. But all these ecosystems are included, but of course the climate is not included. So the measurement of GDP, there are some gaps, but we will not be able to address all of those. So what have we done to get a second estimate is to bring in take out the cost of the loss of CO2. So we said that between 1995 and 2018, we subtracted from the value of natural capital the cost of the emissions of greenhouse gases for every country in the world. And to do that, we valued the greenhouse gases using the social cost of carbon. And now the situation is not so good. And the social cost of carbon, the value depends on what discount rate we take. So if we take a very low discount rate, the value of that social cost is very high. With a higher discount rate, it's low. But with a 5% discount rate, now only 6 countries have had green growth over that period in Europe. There are Latvia, Finland, Norway, Croatia, Slovenia, Croatia, and Sweden. All the rest, when you take out the greenhouse gases, do not have green growth. With 3% discount rate, only 1 country achieves it. That is Sweden. So, and then the picture looks like this for 5%. I haven't plotted the last one. I just wanted to share this with you. Much has been written on green growth and how to achieve it, but less has been done to track whether green growth has been green. This is the kind of first attempt you can see. But clearly, in the future, we would like to track this more carefully. And if we are going to achieve green growth, we will have to reduce the losses from emissions in greenhouse gases, but increase the value of other kinds of natural gas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Please stay here for the gift ceremony. Sayın Profesör Anil Markandya'ya verdiği değerli bilgiler için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Profesör Markandya'ya hediyesini takdim etmek üzere İstanbul Üniversitesi İktisat Fakültesi Dekanı Sayın Profesör Doktor Sayım Yorğun'u sahneye davet ediyorum. Değerli konuklarımız, Uluslararası İstanbul İktisat Araştırma Konferansı saat 11'de doktora salonunda yapılacak oturum ile devam edecektir. Teşekkürler.